night my daughter told me to leave, it was raining so hard I could barely see the end of the driveway. I remember standing at the front door with my duffel bag, the same green canvas bag I'd carried since my army days, and thinking that this couldn't be real. It was December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, and my own daughter was holding the door open, not to let me in, but to make sure I walked out. "Dad, we've talked about this," she said. Her voice was flat. Not angry, not sad, just flat, the way you sound when you're tired of a conversation you decided was already over. "It's not working. You know it's not working." Her husband stood behind her in the hallway, arms crossed, not saying a word. He never said much directly to me. He didn't have to. My daughter did all the talking, and she always seemed to be saying exactly what he wanted to hear. I didn't argue. I'd learned by then that arguing only gave them ammunition. I zipped my jacket, picked up the bag, and walked to my truck. I sat behind the wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. The rain hammered the roof. The windows fogged immediately. I was 63 years old, a retired high school shop teacher, and I had nowhere to go on the night before Christmas Eve. Let me back up, because none of this came out of nowhere, even though it felt that way. My wife Donna passed away 4 years ago. Breast cancer. We'd been married 31 years, and she was the kind of woman who remembered every neighbor's birthday and kept a spare key for the elderly couple across the street in case they ever locked themselves out. When she died, something structural in my life collapsed. Not dramatically, not all at once, just gradually, the way a wall develops cracks you don't notice until the whole thing shifts. My daughter Renee, my only child, suggested I sell my house and move into the spare bedroom at her place. She and her husband had recently bought a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, and the timing seemed to make sense. I was alone. I had a pension from 30 years of teaching and Donna's life insurance, but rattling around a 3-bedroom house by myself was getting harder every season. So I sold the house. Took a loss because the market had cooled. Moved in with my daughter and her husband and their 2 kids. For the first year, it was fine. I helped with the grandkids when they needed it. I fixed things around the house, the back fence, the leaking bathroom faucet, the deck boards that had started to splinter. I cooked dinner twice a week. I stayed out of the way. Then something shifted. I couldn't tell you exactly when. My son-in-law started making comments at dinner, small ones. About the way I loaded the dishwasher, about the television being too loud, about how maybe I should look into senior communities because there was a nice one about 20 minutes away. My daughter laughed at his comments and told me he was just joking. He wasn't joking. They started talking about money, not my money. I wasn't spending their money. I was actually paying them $800 a month for the room, which I'd offered and they'd accepted. But my son-in-law had started a landscaping business that wasn't doing well, and the atmosphere in the house got tight in a way that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the stress they weren't talking about directly. A week before Christmas, my son-in-law sat me down at the kitchen table. My daughter hovered in the doorway and told me they'd decided to convert the spare room into a home office. He said they needed the space. He said they'd been meaning to tell me for a while. He said he was sure I understood. I looked at my daughter. She looked at the floor. I said I'd be out by the weekend. That was 6 days before she held open the door in the rain. I hadn't found anywhere to go. I'd called 2 old friends from the school. One had moved to Arizona, one was dealing with his own family health crisis and had no room. I'd looked at apartments, but the ones I could afford quickly were depressing in ways that felt final. I kept thinking I had more time. I didn't have more time. So there I was, sitting in my truck in their driveway in the rain on December 23rd, my whole life compressed into a duffel bag and 2 cardboard boxes in the truck bed that I covered with a tarp. I had no plan. I was too proud to check into a motel on Christmas Eve, but too lost to think of anything better. I pulled out of the driveway and just drove. I took Route 40 heading east because it was familiar. I'd driven that road 1,000 times. Donna and I used to take it on Sunday afternoons in the summer. No destination, just driving. The rain was still coming down hard, the wipers working overtime. And I had the radio on, but I wasn't really hearing it. I'd been driving maybe 40 minutes when I saw them. A minivan, parked halfway off the right shoulder. The hazard lights were flashing orange through the rain. I almost kept going. Then I saw the figure standing outside the van, a man in a dark jacket with no umbrella, no hood. getting absolutely soaked, and something made me slow down. I pulled over about 30 feet ahead of him and rolled down my window. "You need help?" I called back. He jogged up to my window, rain streaming down his face. He looked about 40, maybe a little younger. Dark eyes, tired. The kind of tired that isn't just about tonight. "Yes, sir," he said. "Tire blew out and my spare's flat too. My wife and my kids are in the van. My phone's at about 4% battery and I can't get a tow truck to come out in this weather. Everyone I've called is backed up 3 hours." I looked back at the van. Through the rain-blurred windows, I could see a shape in the passenger seat and what looked like 2 small heads in the back. "You got a chain?" I asked. He blinked. Yes. I think there's one in the back." "I've got a tow hitch. We can get you to a tire shop. There's one in Millbrook, about 8 miles up." I didn't think about it much. It was just the obvious thing to do. His name was Gideon. I learned that while we hooked up the chain in the rain, both of us on our knees on the wet asphalt, his hazards still blinking. He was from out of state, driving back from a work trip trying to get home before the holiday. His wife's name was Sylvie. When we got the chain attached and I walked back to my truck, I glanced at the van and saw her face at the window. Late 30s, dark hair plastered to the glass, mouthing something that looked like, "Thank you." In the back seat, 2 kids, a girl who looked about 7, pressed against the window watching the rain. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, who had his arm around her. It took about 20 minutes to tow them to the tire shop in Millbrook. The place was still open. Barely the owner looked like he was ready to close up. But when he saw the family coming in out of the rain, 2 soaking wet kids and a mother carrying a diaper bag, he softened. He said he could have a tire on in an hour. Gideon came and found me in the parking lot, where I'd been about to unhook the chain. "Come inside," he said. "Please. It's the least we can do." There was a small waiting area with plastic chairs and a vending machine. Sylvia had gotten the kids out of their wet jackets. The girl, her name was Poppy, she told me immediately and without being asked, climbed into the chair next to me and announced that she liked my truck because it was green. "Thank you," I said. "I like it too." "Where were you going?" she asked. Her mother said, "Poppy, don't interrogate the man. It's okay." I looked at the girl. 7 years old, completely unafraid of strangers in the way that some children are before the world teaches them to be careful. Honestly, I wasn't going anywhere in particular, just driving. She seemed to consider this seriously. "That's what my dad does when he's sad," she said. Gideon cleared his throat. Sylvie bit her lip to hide a smile. I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. But something about that child's simple observation cracked something open in my chest that I hadn't known was sealed shut. We sat in that waiting room for almost 90 minutes because the tire took longer than expected. Gideon bought coffee from the machine for both of us. Sylvie got the kids crackers from her bag, and eventually the boy, his name was Declan, quieter than his sister but watchful, fell asleep in his mother's lap. Poppy stayed awake, occasionally asking me questions about my truck, about whether I'd ever seen a tornado, about what shop class was like. "Do you make things?" she asked. "Used to teach other people to make things," I said. "Furniture mostly, some metalwork." Her eyes got wide. "Can you make a bookshelf?" "Poppy," Gideon gave her a look. "I have a lot of books," she explained to me very seriously. "I need more space." I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in days. It surprised me, the sound of it coming out of my own mouth. When the tire was done and we were all standing in the parking lot getting ready to go our separate ways, Gideon held out his hand. I shook it. "I mean it," he said. "You saved our night, probably our Christmas." "Glad I was on that road," I said. I meant it. I was glad. I turned back toward my truck. I was starting to think about motels again, trying to remember if there was something reasonable in the next town over, when I heard Sylvie's voice behind me. "Wait," she said. I turned around. She and Gideon were looking at each other with the kind of look married people have, that's practically a full conversation compressed into 2 seconds. Then Gideon looked at me. "Where are you actually going tonight?" he asked. I almost lied. I'm not sure why I didn't. "I don't know yet," I said. The silence stretched for a beat. "We have a house," Gideon said. "It's not far from here. We're about 25 minutes out. We've got a guest room. You could stay tonight, or for the holiday if you need to. I know that's..." He stopped, seemed to realize how it might sound. I know we're strangers, you don't have to. But you did something decent tonight and we'd like to return it somehow. I started to say no. The word was halfway formed. Then Poppy appeared at her father's elbow, looked up at me with those completely unguarded eyes and said, "Our house has a fireplace." I followed them home. The house was a farmhouse, older, white with black shutters, set back from the road with a long gravel driveway lined with bare oak trees. It was the kind of house that looked like it had been there longer than anything around it. There were Christmas lights along the porch railing and a wreath on the door. And when we all walked inside, there was the smell of something. Cinnamon, maybe, or the ghost of something baked earlier in the day. That hit me in a way I can't fully describe. It smelled like a house that was actually lived in. Gideon showed me the guest room, simple, clean, a patchwork quilt on the bed that Sylvie said her mother had made. I set my duffel bag on the chair in the corner and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of the house. Sylvie getting the kids to bed in the room down the hall, Gideon in the kitchen, rain still tapping the window but softer now. I didn't sleep well, but I slept. Christmas morning was strange and quiet in a way that I thought would hurt more than it did. Gideon made coffee early and we sat at the kitchen table while the house was still sleeping. He told me about himself. He was an engineer, worked for a firm that designed water treatment systems, traveled more than he wanted to. They bought the farmhouse 3 years ago because Sylvie had grown up in a place like it and wanted their kids to have that. They'd been fixing it up slowly, room by room. I told him about Donna. I told him about the teaching, about the house I'd sold, about the move to my daughter's place and how it had ended. I didn't dress it up. Gideon listened the way some people do, not waiting for his turn to talk, actually listening. "That's rough," he said when I was done. Just that. Not a list of suggestions or a pivot to something more comfortable. Just an acknowledgement that it was rough. We were quiet for a while. The coffee was good. "You said you taught woodworking," he said eventually. "Shop, yeah, 30 years. He was quiet for another moment. Then he said, "I've been trying to build a workshop out back. Old barn structure, foundation solid, but the inside is a mess. I've been putting it off because I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm afraid to start something I can't finish." I looked at him. "I could take a look at it," I said. "If you want." He smiled, and it was the first completely easy smile I'd seen from him. The wariness gone for a second. I'd like that. After breakfast, when the kids woke up and the morning turned into the particular beautiful chaos of Christmas with children, I sat in the living room near the window and watched. Poppy showed me each of her gifts individually and explained why she had specifically wanted each one. Declan demonstrated how his new remote control car worked and then, quietly, asked me if I wanted to drive it for a while. I did. He seemed pleased. Sylvie made a ham. There were mashed potatoes. She'd made a pecan pie from scratch and apologized for it not being perfect, though it tasted perfect to me. At the table, Gideon said grace. He kept it short, just thankful for the food, for safe travels, for the stranger who had stopped in the rain. Across the table, Poppy pointed at me. "He stopped," she said. "Yes," Gideon said. "He stopped." I stayed 3 more days. Not because they pushed me to. They didn't. But there was something happening that I couldn't name precisely. I helped Gideon clean out the barn. We worked steadily, talking sometimes, quiet other times, the kind of comfortable silence you find with certain people. By the 3rd day, we'd mapped out a plan for what the workshop could be. Workbench layout, lighting, a lumber rack along the east wall. He bought some rough supplies months earlier and they were still in boxes. We opened a few. Poppy came out both afternoons and sat on an overturned bucket and talked while we worked. Declan came once, asked one technical question about whether the ceiling height was enough for a table saw, listened carefully to my answer, and then went back inside. On the last morning, I was packing the duffel bag when Sylvie knocked on the guest room door. "Gideon wanted me to give you something," she said. She held out a piece of paper. "A check." I started to say no. "He said you'd say no." "He said you'd say no," she said. "He said to tell you that this isn't payment. He said to call it a retainer." He wants to hire you to come back in the spring and help him finish the workshop properly. He's serious. He already looked up whether he can do it as a legitimate small business expense, and apparently he can. I looked at the check. It was more than I expected. He doesn't have to do that, I said. He knows he doesn't have to, Sylvie said. That's why he wants to. I took the check. I didn't say much more. She hugged me at the door. She was about the same age as my daughter, and the thought crossed my mind and then passed quickly. Poppy made me promise to come back in spring. She reminded me about the bookshelf. I haven't forgotten, I said. I'll have even more books by then, she told me, very seriously. I drove away from that farmhouse on a clear morning, cold and bright. The bare oak trees lit up gold along the driveway. I had a destination now, a month-to-month rental I'd found the week before that I'd been putting off committing to. I called and confirmed it from the road. Small, plain, nothing like the house Donna and I had built together over 30 years. But mine, for now. My daughter called the week after New Year's. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was what I expected. She'd heard from a cousin that I'd been seen at a farmhouse in the county, that I was working for some family she didn't know. She said she hoped I was okay. She said she felt terrible about how things had gone. She said her husband was under a lot of stress, and if I wanted to come back, if I wanted to talk about options, the door was open. She didn't say she was sorry. Not the word itself. I called her back 3 days later. I appreciate the message, I said. I'm doing fine. I found a place to stay and I have some work lined up. I don't need anything from you right now. She went quiet. Then, Dad, we're still your family. I know, I said. And I meant it in the limited biological way that she meant it. But I was thinking about a 7-year-old girl who had sat next to me in a tire shop and asked where I was going, and a boy who had loaned me his remote control car without making a production of it, and a man and woman who had invited a stranger in from the rain without making him feel like a charity case. There are people you share blood with, and then there are people who just show up. I've thought a lot about that night on Route 40, about how close I came to not stopping. I almost didn't. I was tired and sad, and it was raining, and the voice in my head said someone else will stop. Someone younger, someone who isn't driving with everything he owns in 2 boxes under a tarp. But I stopped, and that made everything different. I went back to the farmhouse in April. Gideon had the materials stacked and waiting. We worked 3 weekends in a row, the both of us, and sometimes Declan handing tools and watching carefully. By the end of the 3rd weekend, the workshop was done. Real workbenches, good lighting, a lumber rack that ran the full length of the east wall exactly as we'd planned. The first thing I built in that workshop was a bookshelf. 5 shelves. Oak, tight dovetail joints at the corners, the way I'd always taught my students to do it. I stained it a worn walnut and let it dry in the sun outside the barn. When I brought it inside and set it in Poppy's room, she stood in the doorway and looked at it for a long moment without saying anything. Well? Gideon said from behind her. She turned around and looked at me. It's perfect, she said. She said it the way kids say things when they really mean them, without performance or flourish. Just the plain statement of fact. I drove home that evening with the windows down, the warm spring air coming in, and I thought about Donna. I thought about the Sunday afternoon drives on Route 40 and how she used to put her feet on the dashboard and sing along to songs she only half knew the words to. I thought about how much she would have liked Sylvie, how she would have laughed at Poppy's questions, how she would have approved of Declan's quiet seriousness. I think about the road a lot now. The specific stretch of it in the rain where I saw the hazard lights blinking. The moment I slowed down. I don't know exactly what I believe about things like fate or grace or whatever word you want to use for the way certain nights turn, but I know this. I was kicked out of my daughter's house on December 23rd with nowhere to go, and somehow that was the night my life started making sense again. Not because everything got fixed. Nothing got fixed exactly. I still sleep alone in a small apartment. I still reach for the phone sometimes to call Donna, and the realization still lands the same way. My daughter and I speak, but carefully, the way you speak to someone you're not entirely sure of anymore. But I have work I care about. I have a workshop I help build. I have a 7-year-old girl who sends me hand-drawn pictures in the mail of books she thinks I should read, and a quiet 10-year-old boy who asked me last month if I'd teach him how to use a dovetail jig. and two people who treated me like I was worth something on a night when I wasn't sure of that myself. Some nights are just road and rain and no plan. And sometimes the right thing to do is slow down,